Hello,
Hello.
hello. Long time no talk.
A lot's changed since the last time we've been recording the podcast.
That is very true. I am no longer in college. That's what
Does that mean
changed.
we have to like change the intro now? Because like I think we do talk about ourselves being
Oh,
broke or maybe not broke college students, but we do talk
no.
about being college age nerds. Yeah, that's what it is. College age nerds.
Oh,
And
God. Don't,
we're not anymore. I'm sorry.
don't, don't do this to me. I don't want to think about that. Oh my God. No, I'm still a kid. I'm still young and I'm still hip and
I'm sorry. It's
still doing
ending.
great.
It's only getting closer to
No.
ending.
No. Oh God. Well, yeah, graduation happened. Neither of us walked.
Why walk when you can just sleep? Like actually.
That's true. That's very true. Why walk when you could just sleep? No, yeah. That happened. Um,
Finals happened.
summer
Summer
started.
started.
Summer started. Do you have anything like fun and big planned for the summer right now?
Editing the podcast. What else can be more fun than that?
That's a good one actually. That's a really good one. Um,
What about you? Where are you going?
I'm gonna leave you to that because I. So what have we got for today? On what are we
I
talking
think we're
about?
doing a top pick, right?
I mean, it should be, but we'll see when we start
Yeah,
talking about it.
maybe
It might end up getting a little
maybe we'll change our
spicy.
minds later. But I generally do like this movie. The movie, Crazy Rich Asians. I think it's like
Woo
the
woo.
quintessential every Asian American has to watch movie.
Pretty much,
It's
yeah.
a requirement. You don't get your Asian card until you watch this movie. I'm sorry, this is how it works.
Yeah. I remember when this movie blew up though. I remember I tend to get around to watching movies pretty late in general, but I remember when this movie blew up and it was everywhere and everybody was talking about it. And I heard the title of it and I was like, I don't know if this is going to be a movie that I'm going to enjoy watching. But it ended up being really good. So I was pleasantly surprised. I remember being pleasantly surprised enjoying it, watching it the first time. But with a title like Crazy Rich Asians, I really wasn't I wasn't sure what to
Mhm.
expect. You know what I mean? Like that could really be anything.
Yeah. Same for me. Like I hadn't watched trailers for it or anything. I hadn't even really like known it was happening because like I'm disconnected from the fucking internet. Uh, so like I was at a family reunion and my cousins were like my one of my cousins was like, "Hey, we should go like watch Crazy Rich Asians." And like
Hmm.
no questions asked. Okay, let's go. Fucking hit the movie theater.
Yeah, let's do
So
it.
oh yeah, like a little tangent. Like we were like, okay, let's just go to fucking theater. And then my uncle was like, hey, while you guys are out, can you like buy me some fish? Like not fish to cook. He wanted like us to stop by the pet store and go stop and buy him some like fish for his fish tank. So yeah,
No.
so this trip turned into like okay, first we hit up the movies, then we no we were like we go to the pet store, right? We get the fish, and then the guy was like, "Are you guys like gonna be doing shit after this?" And we're like, "Oh shit, we're gonna be watching a movie. We'll be back." Uh,
Oh, that's so funny. Because I would have definitely taken the fish to watch the movie. Although I don't know, like, do fish like
like movies?
I don't know. Well, do fish like movies? No. I'm wondering if like fish can see like screens that way. Like, do the cones in their eyes have like the kind of like visual? That's a question that I'm not gonna ask right now, actually, because that's gonna just take a long ass time, and both of us are gonna be like curious and look it up. I will look it up after this,
It's a
though.
good prerequisite
Um,
question to whether fish like movies or not. So I do
it
imagine it is
is.
important. We can't answer one question
It's a
without the
very
other.
scientific question. You should be very proud of me right now, because that's a STEM question. That's a girl in STEM question. Um, okay, so Crazy Rich Asians. Let's kind of talk a little bit about like how do you think that this movie was like because everybody was kind of saying it was a turning point, right? It was a turning
Mhm.
point for Asian representation in Hollywood. So how would you say that you've seen that in real life kind of like play out? Like, do you think that's true? Do you think it's not true? Like, what are your thoughts about that particular statement?
I feel like it's hard to say. I mean, like it like came in a time when also like K-pop and stuff was like getting big. So like it's hard to like really put the finger on like whether it was just this movie or like a combination of or you know like it's really hard to like gauge I think what the influence of the movie was because of the time it came. Like did the movie itself
Hmm.
develop an appetite for more Asian stuff, or was like K-pop coming up the thing that helped develop the appetite for this movie to then be successful, right? And it's probably realistically a combination of both.
Hmm.
But I do think if we're talking about turning points, I also think that like it did help. I think like mainstream depictions of like Asians in a way that like nothing really like before or since has really done because there's
Hmm.
so many hot Asians in this movie. So
Hmm.
many.
That's very true. That's very, very true.
Nothing
The
before or
woman who
since.
plays
Yeah, go for it.
the woman who plays Astrid, what's her name?
Jimmy
Gemma
Chan.
Chan. Gemma Chan can kick you in the face. Gemma Chan can do violence at me, and I would still love her.
There we go. We have Yeji's attraction check for the episode, and
It's gonna be a lot more than just that one, though. There's more on the
this is
way.
the movie for the whole checklist to be done. You're right.
Absolutely. No, I actually agree with you. I think that this movie came out at a point where there was a lot going on for the Asian American community within media. But I do think that this was a turning point for like Asians in Hollywood specifically. I think that a lot of people were talking about how like this is the only Hollywood movie that's come out that's been like as big as, other movies in the box office and stuff that had a completely Asian cast, and the last movie that had been that was the Joy Luck Club, which came out a long ass time ago. So
Long
you
ass
know
time
that
ago.
like it's been a while since we've had this kind of just solid, really solid representation in Hollywood specifically, like in the American sphere of entertainment. And I think that this movie really sort of set the groundwork for other bigger films and TV shows that came out even this year, like Beef on Netflix or even Everything Everywhere All at Once,
Hmm.
right? It's just really sort of like put down the concrete and let it dry a little bit before all these movies sort of like came after it, which I think is really, really cool. Um, I do think that it's interesting that you mentioned like the rise of K-pop and K-dramas and stuff in entertainment in America before this sort of resurgence within Hollywood specifically happened, because I think that the plot of Crazy Rich Asians is literally the plot of almost every K-drama I've ever seen, but it's just with Asian Americans instead of
Hmm.
like Koreans, and it's like set in Singapore instead of Korea. But the idea that there's like this really rich guy and he falls in love with a really poor girl and brings her to meet the family, and the family fucking hates her because they think that she's a gold digger, and then at the end she gets the last laugh because she gets the ring on her finger is like the plot of every single it's like the plot of every single K-drama that I've seen. Like Airs is like that. There's literally just always like a rich guy and he always falls in love with a poor girl, and his family always hates her, and it's always like the plot of the movie or the show. So I have my own thoughts about this and my own theories about this, but what do you think differs from seeing like a K-drama with this plot versus like having an Asian American story that has this plot
I'm
specifically?
sorry to say, but I have not watched a single K drama, and you can feel free to hate me now.
You know what? It's okay. Nobody's perfect.
This is my fatal flaw. This is my heroic. This is the beginning of my heroic tragedy right here. Uh,
Exposing yourself for scrutiny on the internet.
exactly.
Yeah.
For not watching K dramas. I'll get to
That's
it.
a fair that's a fair reason for people to tear into you though. I got to say. I got to say if anyone's going to roast you,
This is my
it should be for
cancelable
that.
trait right here. Yeah, so I cannot answer that question because I have not watched a single K drama. I will get to it. I'll get to it. We
You'll
have a whole
figure something out.
podcast to make excuses to watch K dramas. So
This is true. This is true. That was the reason our podcast was created, actually, was just so that we could watch fun things
Actually, like,
and hopefully get money for it
not
later.
even a joke. Not even a joke. Please send us money. Please send us money so we can watch more shit.
Please send us money, please. Okay, that's a fair assessment, but I guess just like in general, even though you haven't watched a K drama, just like what do you think is the difference between having like an Asian American piece of art and having an Asian piece of art that are doing the same thing, but like how do you think the particular environment in which that is being consumed, like how do you think that changes the narrative?
Uh, well, for like one, I think I think I would suspect that like the characterization like changes a little for the main character, especially since she's like an American and all that stuff. There's like a little hints of like um dealing with like the fact that like you're kind of I don't like I said I don't watch K dramas, but I do imagine there are like elements in this story about the main
Mm-hmm.
character. I don't remember her name, but it's not important for now. Um, there are elements of her character going to Asia and like kind of like struggling with what her culture is, right? That I find
Mm-hmm.
like subtle but like really interesting in the movie because like the
Mm-hmm.
matter of the fact is that like she's never going to completely belong in Singapore, right? In a lot of
Mm-hmm.
the ways that like we as Asian Americans, you know, we grew up here, we were raised here. Like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of our cultural like ideas come from America. Like we fundamentally, even though we look Asian, like we will never be able to like
Mm-hmm.
truly completely fit in Asia. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that the movie gets to pull off in like this like parallel way with like money as well, right? Like she's not
Mm-hmm.
only feeling out of the water because she doesn't have old money
Mm-hmm.
like her fiance's family does, but she's also feeling out of place
Mm-hmm.
because she doesn't have like the culture of it too, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's
Yeah.
why like we get like certain scenes like the mahjong scene, which is like resonantly powerful in those ways, not just because it's a money
Mm-hmm.
thing, but also because it's a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with you. I think that there are just elements to this film that in commentary in this film that you just wouldn't be able to find in a piece of art that has been made like in Asia for
Mm.
Asians. Um, there is I don't want to say like it's oblivion, right? Like those pieces of art, they aren't trying to tell Asian American stories, so they don't. So it's just they're just stories with Asian people
Yeah.
in them, right? And like while that is powerful in and of itself, there are things that like only Asian American artists can really pull off in terms of speaking to an
Yeah.
experience and talking about like why is this important and like why does this mean so much to so many people and what does this mean and how would this affect like seeing this kind of scene with this specific character in it, what is that going to do not just to an Asian person but like an Asian American person
Yeah.
specifically. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting that you mentioned that like it was coming at a time where like Asian art in general was just becoming big, but I do think that there is something significant about this movie in that it was like made for Asian Americans and not just Asians in general. In terms of portrayal, right? There are quite a few character archetypes in this movie. And I'm wondering how you feel about that. Just that. Like how do you feel about character archetypes in general? Do you think the movie did a good job with their character archetypes or like all that good
Man, like
stuff?
I have like such mixed feelings on this because like on one hand,
Uh-huh.
we got
Me
like
too.
a bunch of hot
Me
Asians
too.
everywhere. And like I love that because like Asians typically don't get cast in like the archetype of like just like hot people in general in like Hollywood stuff.
That's
Right?
true.
So like I'm actually pretty happy with the fact that like even though some of these archetypes are a bit shallow as far as like how these characters work, it's fine because
Uh-huh.
like we don't ever get to see it, right? So I'll take
Uh-huh.
like the shallow like the fiance in the movie I think is like a pretty one dimensional character, but like I'll fucking take it because like we just don't
Yeah.
get to see that. We like Hollywood, like if you're white, you get to see like all sorts of like you get to see your characters in one dimension, two dimensions, three dimensions. You get to see them in all the dimensions, right?
Mhm.
For like Asian Americans, it's like you don't always get to see that. So like I
Mhm.
don't like just getting the one dimension is like a cool thing in its own right, even if it's like not that
Mhm.
great. On the other hand, the comic relief in this movie is like it's the same comic relief that we always get when it comes to Asian characters. I'm not saying Asian characters shouldn't be comic relief. I'm just saying like
Mm-hmm.
it does not break any ground with Ken Jeong and like Aquafina. Like it doesn't. Like
Mm-hmm.
they play the characters that they always play, and like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I wish for something that feels like it wants. Okay. I don't know if the movie wants to have been a revelation or revolution in like film for Asian Americans, but that is how it is viewed. And I feel like
Yeah.
for a movie that is that way, it it really I think backpedals a little bit in like having Aquafina and like Ken Jeong like just play their like normal like Asian stereotype comic relief stuff. Like this is the shit that we've always seen. It's not surprising.
Mm-hmm.
It's not particularly interesting to me, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
there are so
Yeah.
many more dimensions you can do to have an Asian comic relief character, and like they just really don't do that here, which is like fine, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
like I would have wanted if I were in charge, I would have wanted to take it a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that I think that the biggest part of a film like this that I was actually discovering a little bit like after I'd seen it and I watched like other films with these same people in it is that like a lot of Asian Americans find like their success in stand-up
Hmm.
comedy, which I did not like. I didn't really like know that until I watched Crazy Rich Asians and I started watching like Ronnie Chiang and Aquafina and like these people that, that are considered comedians, right? That are big in the entertainment industry, but then they get cast in these movies where they are required to play comedic relief because that's their
Hmm.
job, right? And like you'll see in the movie too, like Ronnie Chang just plays himself. Like there's no there's no dimensionality to his character either. He just plays like a rich asshole. Ken Jong, I agree with you. Same with Aquafina. I think that what they did with Aquafina though was like it was coded in a way that I could like genuinely respect it just cuz like for one, this was like one of her big sort of like breakout roles. Like
Hmm.
she got Ocean's 8 after this. She got signed to a ton of movies after this movie, right? So this was really her breakout role, and I think that she did very well in putting herself out there for her first movie. I think she very much established like this is what I can do, this is what I'm good at, and like if you need a character that wants to do this, then like I'm your gal for
Hmm.
that, right? Like I will bring 120% to this character specifically, and I think that's why she got Ocean's 8. I think that's why she ended up booking all of those other movies as well, right? Like she is good at what she does, and I think she showcased that very well. I do think it came at like the minor expense of being very stereotypical comic relief, but like I think that like for what she was asked to do, she executed it
Yeah, I
very very
think they did
well.
good.
And
I just
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah,
kind of wish that was not the material that they were given.
yeah,
I don't.
yeah,
I think
exactly.
I think in this movie all the actors did fucking excellent jobs, right? But
Uh-huh.
it's just like if you're writing this type of movie, and like I said before, I don't think that they knew that this movie was going to be as much of an Asian American cornerstone as it is, right? But if I
Mm-hmm.
was writing the movie knowing that it would become such an Asian American cornerstone, I would have pushed a little harder on breaking down like what we can do with like Asian comic reliefs, right? And like trying something a little
Mm-hmm.
different.
Yeah.
I think that would have been good.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I definitely agree with you on that. So we did mention comic relief, but I think that something that was really big for this film for a lot of kids watching was to see Asian people like looking cool. So how did you feel about the representation of like money in Crazy Rich Asians? Because like rich is literally part of the title. So like how do you think like the show and display of wealth that this movie needed to have to like come across as like because I mean, in every movie where there's wealthy people, you have to have like a couple scenes where you're like, ah, yes, like they're this kind of rich.
Uh
You know what I mean?
huh.
And there are a couple of scenes like that in this movie. The one that comes to mind, I think, like the one that comes to the front of my mind is the one where Gemma Chan, or Astrid as she's called in the movie, walks into a jewelry store, and the guy's like talking about how her wearing one of his pieces would be like better advertisement than he could ever buy. And so he's letting the earrings go at like cost, and it's like $5 million. And you're just like, that's at cost? That's like, that's just the bait.
I will never make
Wow,
that
you
much
know?
money in my life. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. So like, there's definitely like a good amount of that in the movie. So how do you think that this sort of specifically seeing those kinds of scenes with Asian people in them, like did you find that in any way revolutionary? What are your
I
thoughts?
thought so. Like, you know me, I have like strong opinions about money. uh,
Yeah.
pretty sure
I
it's.
am not a
I am
capitalist.
pretty sure we made it up. Um, but also, I cannot deny, despite all of my strong opinions about money, that it was kind of pretty cool to see Asian success in that way. Because like I think growing up the way I did, uh that was always like the aspiration to not just have money, but to have generational wealth, right? To
Mhm.
to 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 maybe not get that for myself, but to get that for like people down the line, right? And
Mhm.
I think growing up, you find quite quickly that like that
Mhm.
shit probably not gonna happen without a lot of like
Mhm.
luck and a lot of
Mhm.
shit going the right way, no matter how hard you work, right? Like
Yeah.
like
Absolutely.
you work hard, you'll do well for yourself. You probably won't starve, but you're never gonna make like generational wealth, the type of money that these people have. Um, so
Yeah.
in a way, like it's kind of like fulfilling like that like feeling of like having that, like I am quite
Mhm.
sure, right, that I will never be able to like hit generational wealth like that. So like that dream just kind of like been abandoned. And then there's also a lot of other reasons, not just like it's impossible, but also like the exploitative nature of like making that type of money. But also like there's also monkey brain part of me where just like nah, but it's also like really cool to see like just to see like Asian people actually
Monkey
have it,
brain part of
right?
me.
Because like
Yeah.
we don't get to see like Asian people have that type of wealth and success like here in America, right? I mean you see it
Yeah.
sometimes with like people. I can't think of any, but I'm quite sure they exist, right? But you don't really see them in like your everyday communities, right? You don't see them in like media being depicted like that, right?
Yeah.
That type of level of success in which they have more than just money, but they also have power, and they also have like the ability to just like live that type of lifestyle, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
like there's a part of me that's just like actually, yeah, that's like kind of cool,
Mhm.
but also, but
Yeah.
also no.
Yeah. I think what you're hitting on is absolutely true. Like just having that baseline of representation is important. Um for me, I think that if we like we are viewing this movie a lot and we're talking about it a lot just in terms of like what it's doing for the community, but like if you look at it like just on a plot level, I actually think that this movie does less money moving than other movies that I've seen that do money moving.
Mm,
Just in terms of the way that they make everything just seem very like classy and very like given.
mm,
I think that there are ways to do this kind of wealth establishment in media where it's like you draw it's a very fine line between like being tacky rich and being like rich, like oh fuck they're that rich kind of rich,
like
right?
old
And
money
you
rich, yeah.
yeah, and what I really like about this is that what I like about what this movie did with wealth specifically is that they do like both, right? They have Astrid walking into the jewelry store and like getting earrings that cost $5 million, and then they also have like Pig Lynn and her family who are like tacky rich and do the thing where like I don't know, she makes a joke about how like her house looks like Donald Trump's bathroom with like the gold and everything, and I was like that's actually really funny, um, just because like there is there is like analysis between like new money and old money,
Hmm.
right? And the way that old money spends their money versus the way that new money spends their money, and the way that new money is always trying to prove that they have money. Whereas old money, they're always trying to kind of hide their money and be very private about it because they're afraid of being envied. This is actually a really I'm getting this from like a really great video
Hmm.
from ContraPoints about envy and like wealth, specifically in the United States. But when you kind of do reframe this movie as like an Asian American experience, there's a lot of commentary here on like the difference between the kind of money that our parents want us to have and the kind of money that America expects us to make, and the way that like we're expected to kind of show that off. I think the bachelor party in the movie is actually a really great indicator of this, where what I he's played by Jimmy Yang, but I don't know what his character's name is supposed to be. Bernard. Bernard, played by Jimmy Yang, like takes Nick Young and like his buddy on, to his bachelor party, and it's just like this huge show of ostentatious wealth, right? Like they have a barge in the middle of fucking international waters and they just throw an absolute rager,
Hmm.
right? Like that kind of stuff costs a lot of money, but it's a different kind of wealth and a different look, like it's a different outlook on money than like Astrid buying $5 million earrings, or the way that like Michelle Yeoh's character, what's her name?
Eleanor.
Eleanor. Eleanor, Nick Young's mom, like the way that Miss Young looks at wealth as well, right? Like there's a very different kind of
Yeah.
interaction of like wealth and how people look at money, and there's just really interesting commentary there, and they don't overdo it in being like, oh, like you see this, like look at this, like pointing at this and being like, look, like commentary, it's so cool, but it's just this very subtle like, okay, so there's like this kind of rich and then there's this kind of rich, and as an audience we're just kind of like, okay, like these are the differences, and when you look at it closer there's just a lot more there to be analyzed, which I think is really cool. So yeah, just like a couple things there that I did want to touch on in terms of like money moves, right? So like the visibility of it, right? But I don't think they overdo the visibility of it. The difference between like old money and new money, right? And the way they kind of analyze that, and also like just the way that us as like Americans particularly look at the differences between those kinds of wealth, and like which one we sort of resonate with more. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, like the wealth that I'm used to seeing like on social media and whatnot is the kind of wealth that like Bernard is showing off, right? Like big parties and, just trying your best to show off how much money you have, versus like this very silent, like moves in the shadows money that we don't see much of at all.
Hmm.
I just think that like the differences and the similarities between those two is just really interesting, and I think the way that they do it was proper because it is a love story at the end of the day,
Hmm.
right? Like it is a romance. So they can't spend time really being like, look at this like wonderful political, like socio-political commentary that we have for you today, right? They just kind of like drop it in at different intervals. And I think it works. Like I think it works really well with what they're trying to do. It's like a seamless integration into the story, so we're not like confused as to why they're showing, like, why are you showing me a party scene? Well, it's a bachelor party, right? So like it's gonna be a rager, it's gonna be crazy. Why are you showing me Astrid like going to the, jeweler? It's because, we're trying to establish like how rich Nick Young's family is, right? Like there are plot reasons why these things are happening. It's not just that they're like they just put these scenes in just for commentary. So I can appreciate that as well.
Uh,
Did you have any last thoughts on it?
I actually find it to be a very like interesting topic because like a lot of Asian Americans growing up here, right? Like I don't want to say it, but like money is like a thing that's like probably on our minds more than it should be, right?
Eh,
Because like uh because like the American dream and stuff like that. Like our parents are trying to build generational wealth, right? And it
yeah,
oftentimes turns into what like that new money look because like we're like
yeah,
for like boat people, like immigrants like
yeah.
it cannot be old money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh and I think it's a conversation that like gets really interesting because like a lot of like us Asian Americans like then have to navigate like this like feeling of like wanting to make money, but also having to deal with like the idea that like we will never be old money, at least not in our lifetimes, right? by
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
nature of what old money is. Like it literally cannot happen within our generation, right?
Yeah.
So like I find like the depictions of like new money like quite interesting in that way, right?
Mhm.
And like you seem to like it. I'm not like the biggest fan of how it is done in the movie, right?
Okay.
Because like it's often played off as like for like jokes, right? Like especially
Mhm.
with Aquafina's characters like family, right? I forget what
Yeah.
the characters' names are, right? But it really is like played off a lot of jokes. And I'm not saying the movie needs to like be doing like deep analysis on why like people act this way, but like people do act these way for very interesting, complex reasons. There's a lot of like
Mhm.
there's there, there's a lot of like fear and anxiety and like shit that like goes into like the way the why you would spend money that way, the why you would act like that, like why you would like gold plate like your entire bathroom, right?
Yeah.
Why it like looks tacky and stuff like that, as you mentioned like
Mhm.
earlier, right? And like I'm not saying this movie's a romance, like it does not have to deal with these like things,
Mhm.
but I also feel like the depiction of it is quite one dimensional, right? And it like really
Mhm.
erases like these like interesting things to like, talk about. Same
Mhm.
thing with like the old money stuff, right? Like there are a lot of reasons why like those people act in certain ways, right? And like
Mhm.
a lot of questions about like how they have that money, how they continue to hold on to that money and stuff like that. But this is
Mhm.
also not like socialist propaganda, so like I'm not expecting it to to engage with
Fair.
those topics. Um, but like, but
Fair.
in
Fair.
its what I'm saying is like in its depiction of like old money versus new money, like I feel like um
They could
they
have
could
done
have done
more.
more, and not that they need to have
Mhm.
done more, but like uh
They
they
could
could have,
have.
right? And maybe there is a
Yeah.
spot somewhere later for some other piece of art media to examine this, right? And I would like to see it done, right? Will I think Hollywood, an old money institution, do that? I'm not convinced, but that's what we have indie filmmakers for. So,
We can hope. We can hope. We can have our fingers crossed and whatnot. But yeah, I agree with that as well. Like, while I do think that they did, a good enough job with it. I mean, it does leave a lot, to be wanting. But I try to give it the benefit of the doubt because I know that like it is a romance movie, so there's just
mm,
time reasons why they can't like get into the, nitty gritty of it. But I think overall this speaks to a kind of like larger and more interesting aspect of like wealth just in terms of like being Asian, but like I don't know about your mom, but my mom's obsessed with money. Like
I don't want to.
like I mean, that makes her sound very shallow, but like when my mom looks at like success, she thinks of wealth,
Yeah,
right? And she makes that very clear to me every time we have conversations about like my future. She's like, you need to make a lot of money. You need, like, if you want to be happy and you want to be like successful and you want to be comfortable in this world, you need money. And to be honest with you, I don't disagree with her. But it is, I know it's a common like idea that a lot of Asian American parents tend to think this way, or
I,
Asian parents tend to think this way, and like their Asian American kids sort of get the brunt of that, and like kind of mold their expectations of success around
I
wealth. So like, what do you think
I
about
don't
that?
disagree with you, but I would like to offer
Yeah,
perhaps an explanation. Right, because
yeah,
I think you're
please.
100% correct. I think a lot of the ways that like we grew up as Asian Americans, success is defined by like money, right? And having things and being able to show that
Hmm.
money, right? And I would imagine the reason is because like a lot of our parents they came here as immigrants, right? And when you have and like money doesn't buy happiness except like not really, right? Because
Hmm.
someone said it really well. I forgot who it was, but they said like money doesn't buy happiness, but money does buy things that alleviate stressors, right?
Yes,
So
yeah.
for our parents going from like dirt poor, like literally off the boat with like dollars in their pockets, money did buy happiness in a way, right? They like
Hmm.
it's 100% true, right? Um, but the other so like they genuinely not only think but have seen the fact that money did buy happiness in a lot of ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they don't, I think, then understand is that like after a certain point, money no longer buys happiness. Money just puts you
Mm-hmm.
into a wealth bracket in which now you have to compete against other wealthy people in order to show off your wealth. And I think like that is the tension here that comes with the immigrant generation and then the generations after the immigrants, right? Because like the immigrant generation, literally money did make their lives tangibly better, less stressful, and happier, and then
Mm-hmm.
they gave that to us. We no longer grow up like that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us now grow up trying to get being raised with the idea that money will continue to buy happiness, right? But we are actually at the point in which
Mm-hmm.
money no longer buys happiness, right? We are
Mm-hmm.
at the point in which other things have more value, right? And more money actually.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of very interesting studies, right? But after a certain point, money actually just like kind of makes your life worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, yeah, and like w- when it does come down to talking about money in terms of like making lives better and worse, like of course our parents, especially if they were immigrants, like they have a very specific interaction with wealth and
Mm-hmm.
money because they usually came from a country that was being
Bombed.
like yeah, and like people with power and money were like exploiting people with
Yeah.
lesser, right? And so they come to a country of that's labeled as like a country of opportunity, and opportunity for them is like wealth and power, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the influence that you can have if you just are in a specific tax bracket, right? um like I think it's really interesting, like Ronnie Chiang did a bit about this in like one of his Netflix specials, in which he talks about like why do Asian parents want their kids to be doctors, right? Like why is that like a
Mm-hmm.
thing? And it's like it's about the money and the
Yeah.
prestige, because there's no quicker way to get money and prestige and be in a certain tax bracket in one generation. You can turn it all around in one generation if your kid becomes a doctor. And I think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's why so many parents put an emphasis on like you have to, you know, get a good job that makes a lot of money. It's this wealth aspect that has to do with like the generations after you and sort of fulfilling like what they believe is their purpose of like making wealth and power,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's sad, but it's a true and real and very like common
Yeah.
experience that a lot of us have dealt with.
And yeah, and I
Um,
think just like the disconnect between like those two generations is really that like our generation, like because we grew up with like a lot more than our parents did, we get to see money not yield the same rewards, right?
mm-hmm,
That our parents' generation did. Like we do not get to see like that immense tangible benefit, right? And I think that's why like sometimes we have a really hard
mm-hmm,
time talking to our parents and explaining our like situations like with them, right? It's like yeah, I can be a doctor to build more generational wealth, but like do I like even want to be building generational wealth? Is that actually like a worth it goal? And for them it is because like it works. It clearly does, right? But for us
mm-hmm,
it's like, like we grew up well enough in which we can start to think and dream about like other things, and like maybe building generational wealth isn't
mm-hmm,
actually like the thing that like is what we find meaningful in life. Whereas like for them, like like it's a lot more cut and clear. Like they saw it happen,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
And I guess that's the thing.
yeah,
Like I really want to emphasize is that like like I'm not excusing the way that like things happen and like the expectations and like kind of like the messed up ways in which those get into our heads and mess us up, but
mm-hmm,
I try to offer an explanation for it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's easy to look at something and be like, oh, like it's just from my parents' generation. I don't really understand it. And I don't have to because I'm not part of that generation
Hmm.
anymore. But it is worth it to kind of look at these things and be like, where does that come from? Why is that a thing? Um, my last point on this money thing, and I'd love to hear what you have to kind of think about that. So, like, just in terms of the plot of Crazy Rotations as a movie, you mentioned that, like, you kind of wish that they had done more with how, you know, they display wealth and, you know, just you wish that they had done like a little bit more in that area. So like what would you have changed? Like what do you think is a more comprehensive way to look at like money, and how would you depict that in a piece of media like this?
Mm, for this story, I'm not sure.
Perhaps I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. Perhaps I'm like, fix it.
For the for
If it's so wrong, then fix it.
for this story, like I don't think there is like much change because like at the end of the day, it is a romance. I'm not expecting like philosophical, like sociological, like explorations into like wealth and money and stuff like that in this movie. So there like any change you make inherently like detracts a bit from what the actual point is of the movie. uh,
Mm-hmm.
but like I guess like I don't know like
Yeah. I
I
don't know.
I
That's a good
I
answer.
guess then if I were like in charge and like the small change I think I can make without like completely changing the form of the movie is like maybe like not have like Aquafina's like family and like her character like be as much of the comedic butt of the joke for like how they act there's way to do comedies in which different parts are the actual punchline, right? And I feel like a lot of the punchlines for
Mm-hmm.
like Aquafina's character and her family, right, was that like all the like their new money shenanigans and how it's like, you know, um how ridiculous it looks, right? And they do a couple
Mm-hmm.
times in the movie where they like break they where Aquafina's character kind of does like explain the difference between old and new money, and I think those are really interesting. Maybe have more of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Explain like the difference and explain how like man like I think something with like Asian Americans and the relationship with like old and new money is that like a lot of us growing up Asian American kind of like realize that like we're not gonna get old money like like
Yeah.
not in our lifetimes at least, right?
Yeah, we already kind of decided that that wasn't really like a feasible
Uh,
goal.
and like
Yeah.
I don't know, I kind of want to see the main characters. I will remember her name. Uh, Rachel.
Rachel.
I do kind of want I think it would have been kind of cool to like see her like address that and like talk about it, right? And like because she is at the intersection of that actually, right? She has
Yeah.
worked all her life. She's a successful economics professor. She probably makes like decent money. She probably is new money, right? She's in academia.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's probably doing well for herself. And like um but also like they talk a lot about the social aspects of it, but I maybe want to see them talk about like the economic aspects of it, in which he's like in
Mm-hmm.
which she genuinely at some point is like, dang, like no matter how hard I work, I will never be as rich as like Nick. That type of wealth and
Yeah.
power is never going to be accessible to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I think it's sorry, go ahead,
I
finish.
was gonna say I don't even think I need to come up with an answer or anything, right?
Yeah.
Just to kind of like put that out there and like just have that feeling out there because you know me and art, I think art is really good in the way it helps vocalize feelings that we have inside. Even if it doesn't give us an
Mm-hmm.
answer, it just gives us something to say. Shit, like yeah, I felt that, right? Just to have her
Mm-hmm.
say that, I think, or like some part of the story like allude to that, I think would have been like I don't know, like a cool cathartic thing to like see depicted
Mm-hmm.
in media.
Yeah. I do think that like there's also room for that to have happened with Nick, which is what I was saying. Like you mentioned Nick and I was like, "Oh fuck yeah, he's a character. I forgot about
He's
that."
such a like a
Um he's just the himbo. He is like the girl in other
yeah,
movies. Do
he
you know
is
what I
there to
mean?
look good.
Which I love, like which I really genuinely love. Like I'm glad that they didn't have like him really take the wheel
Me too.
in any like like he wasn't like at the forefront of like all of the shit that was happening with the story. Like really it was Rachel and Eleanor
And Astrid,
and
yeah.
like yeah, like it was, mostly them.
He's inciting incident.
So,
That is what he is.
yeah, he really is. He like started the plot and then fucked off. I think that there's something interesting that could have been done with Nick there. And you were talking about like the way that they might have like played that with Rachel, but I argue that like the way that they kind of start with Nick, right, is that like he's a super rich kid, like living on his own in a city without his family, right, and like he is basically like pretending to be poor.
hmm
Like
Yeah.
there's a couple of things that Rachel mentions of like you literally like play basketball at the Y that smells really bad and like you refuse to get a gym membership and blah 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 and I think there's something really interesting about like the way that he chooses to live his life in light of being as rich as he is Like, and they don't ever talk about it in the movie, like physically, right? Which again, I think is like it's for plot reasons, right? Like the plot isn't about Nick living his life in America. The plot is about like his love story with Rachel. So like obviously they spend more time on that, but I think it would have been really interesting for them to like have taken a second to be like, why is it that poor people, like rich people, like to pretend that they're poor? Or like, what is going on here in the psyche of somebody who has grown up their entire lives rich and has lived their life, most of their life, right? Like, never wanting for anything, right? Like, why do they want to live like this? And like, I think it kind of goes back to like what you were saying about like after a certain amount of money, your life just becomes really miserable and hard. And I think that his character embodies that in a really sad way. Um, you just see him really struggle with the fact that he is a part of his
Hmm.
family. And if they had wanted to spend a little bit more time on that and dissecting it, I think that Nick's character would have been a really great avenue for like talking about wealth and the different things that it does to people.
Yeah, I'm more convinced now that you say it like that it could have been done. Before
Yeah.
you asked me how I would change it, I'm like I'm not quite sure. But now that you put it like this, his character is actually a great avenue to explore questions like this,
Mm-hmm.
and without fucking up the plot too much, right? Because like he's
Yeah.
already kind of not doing shit, you know.
Doing anything.
So having him like ruminate on some of that, and it's like some of it's there, right? Because he's like willing to like leave his family and like stuff
Yeah.
for
Rachel.
Rachel.
You'll get it.
No,
You'll
I
get
won't.
it.
um, so, so I think some of it's there, um, and that would have actually really been really cool to see. Maybe it's in the books, but it's definitely not in the movies. I also
Mm-hmm.
see like Hollywood as like the type of institution it is. It's just like I'm not going to ever expect something like that from Hollywood.
Mm. Yeah.
Like Holly, like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I would love to think that like they had all of these ideas down on paper and it was just some asshole Hollywood exec that was like, no, this ain't gonna sell. Um,
that's not how it works. I'm not sad.
yeah, no, I don't know about this one, guys. I just don't think it's realistic. Um, okay, so we've talked about money, we've talked about comic
Just to
relief,
say
we've
something
talked
about
about
money. Like it
representation.
might sound from my conversations about this that I'm like jealous of like
Yeah.
new money, old money. I'm gonna be real. I don't fucking want money. I don't even want new
Yeah,
money.
yeah,
I'm gonna live under a
yeah.
bridge. uh,
I think
I think that's a
that,
dimension that the movie kind of misses. It's where like we're talking about new money, old money, but there's also the option of just like having enough, and that's cool too.
yeah,
And like
yeah.
no
I
one
think
really in
that
this movie just like is okay with just having enough.
I think that they kind like touch ish on that with like Nick at the very end,
Hmm.
right? Like when he's like, no, like I am set on being with this girl, and like if it means that I can't have her, I'm gonna move back to the States. I'm gonna give up like my ownership of the company, and I'm gonna go chase her.
Hmm.
Like you guys don't realize how serious this is. And like I think that him kind of putting that ultimatum in front of his mother was like ultimately the reason why his mother like made the decision that she did where she was like, okay, well, like if that's the choice, like obviously I want to keep you in my life, right? Which is like good, but they like barely touch on it. He doesn't ever really talk about it. It's just kind of like assumed.
Hmm.
Um but I do agree with you. I think that there is like there's money, there's new money, old money, no money, and then there's like the other option, which is like being middle class and being happy being middle class. Though uh ContraPoints has a good point about like middle class and middle class wealth and like how that kind of in and of itself is like a really interesting thing, and like middle class people are usually the unhappiest
Yeah.
actually between having money and having no money. But like there is the option of like having enough to be satisfied, and satisfaction is just something that like our culture does not promote
Hmm.
anymore,
There
you
there are
know.
some like really interesting sociological like economic studies that like I would love to talk about, but like
Uh-huh.
but now we're just turning into a classroom.
We're turning into a finance
We're turning into a
podcast.
finance podcast. And
Okay, listen, man. Listen, bro. Like,
but I'll just put it out there. There is a lot of very interesting research about money and happiness, the relationship between the two, right? I would
mm-hmm.
recommend if you're interested, go look it up. Um, and we just don't have the time to recap it all here. But
Fair
it's
enough.
very interesting research.
Mm-hmm. It is indeed. Link it in the description below, bro.
I'll look for it. I'll look for it while I'm editing the podcast.
Awesome.
Okay,
So
I feel like we've talked a lot about a lot of things, but like this is a romance
yes.
movie. How do you?
I was just about to say that. I was literally just about to say that. Oh my god. The way I was like, we've talked a lot about a lot of other stuff, but like, this is a rom com at the end of the day. So give me your opinions on love. The way I was just about to fucking say that, bro. We have the same fucking brain cells.
Okay.
All right, give it
All
to
right.
me. Lay it
All
on
right.
me. Tell me about love.
I was gonna ask you like how do you feel about like how romance is like done and depicted in this movie? Like, do you like it? Do you not? Like, i- is this a good romance? I think we've done one
Mm.
romance on this podcast so far, so always be my maybe. So like, better, worse? How are we feeling?
I think that this does I think it like okay, because like always be my maybe it has like such a it has such a close like it's such a special place in my
Mm,
heart. And like as a romance comedy, I think that it does a lot in terms of like breaking some pretty established stereotypes of like what romance can be. And I think Crazy Rich Asians does that by leaning into the
yes.
stereotypes. And I'm gonna explain that. This like story, right, of like the poor girl who like falls in love with a rich guy and like goes across the world and like meets his family, family hates her. Like that's a very common story template.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the way that they have taken the story template and made it something original, right? They've made it something into their own and they've sprinkled in like enough differences and enough like stereotype breakers within that story that I think do a lot to make the story something original without like really changing the core narrative. They like just change the perspective of it a little bit. So for instance, right? A lot of times when we get this view of a couple versus the parents, right? We don't ever see the parents' side of
Mm-hmm.
things. With Eleanor, though, in this movie, we can very clearly see like why she doesn't like Rachel. And to be honest with you, like she has a good reason not to like
Yeah.
Rachel. Just in terms of the way that she's grown up, right? And the way that the expectations that have been on her shoulders, like, of course she doesn't like this rando who like latched onto her son who doesn't come from a place of like economic prosperity, right? Like for her, that's ringing all of the alarm bells in her head of like, oh, my son is going to get taken advantage
Mm-hmm.
of, right? And like I can understand that. And like as much as I would like to say like, oh, like it's irrational, like she should have been accepting blah blah blah. Like if it was my son and like I was in that economic position, right? Like if I was in that tax bracket and I saw my son bring home like an economics professor of all people after having run away to the United States, I would have been like, boy, you are crazy. Like what the hell are you doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if that was my life, absolutely. It's completely rational for me to like understand why she doesn't like this. And in other pieces I've seen the parents just become like the ultimate villain, right? Like their side is given no sympathy and even if it is, it's just like, oh, it's just irrational anyway, right? Like so even just with that small perspective shift, the story becomes very different. And adding in other elements of romance to that as well, like the flip of like Nick and Rachel. So we have like Astrid and her husband,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where like Astrid is the affluent one and her husband is the one that like didn't come from money and like kind of the differences between like how gender kind of plays a role in that as
Mm-hmm.
well. Like I think it's they don't spend a lot of time on it talking about Astrid and her husband's relationship. They really don't. It's a very minuscule part of the movie, but it's very important because it shows you like how much grace that Rachel really has for this entire situation and like the differences between her expectations and an expectation for like a man who came from nothing marrying into money, right? Like it's a very different story. There's a lot of different elements at play there, but even adding that small story element into it, like juxtaposing Rachel and Nick's relationship between like Astrid and her husband's was like it did volumes to proportionize the story and balance it out and make it into something that's actually intriguing to watch versus just being like a stereotype fest, which this movie is, but I think it does it well,
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
know? So, yeah. That's my take on it at least. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think like on like a purely like romantic dramatic sense, like the movie does a really good job. You know, you stay on the edge of your seat, you're genuinely invested in the relationship, you're cheering for Rachel and Nick to figure it out. Like as a piece of technical writing, like completely here
Mhm.
for it. I had a lot of fun with it, right? Like this is what I expect out of a rom-com, right?
Mhm.
It's I was gonna say it's competent. It's more than competent. It's good, right? Uh, the thing I find really interesting about like the way like romance is like depicted in this movie in this film is like how like success and like wealth like play into your relationship dynamics, right? Because
Mhm.
like the truth of the they're really trying to touch on it a lot with like Rachel, Nick, and then Astrid and like her ex ex's like relationship, right?
Mhm.
Where or not ex at the moment, but ex by the end of the movie,
Mhm.
where
Yeah.
where like especially for what's his name, Astrid's husband or
I have no idea. Let me see.
well like
Um
his problem is that like he has a lot of like inferiority going on in here because
is it Michael?
Michael.
It's Michael. It's Michael.
I'll forget.
It's
I'll
Michael.
forget. You keep that up. I will forget. um, Michael has like a lot of.
That is such a white. I'm
It
sorry.
is.
That's such a white
That's what
name.
was going through my head, but I didn't want to be the first one to say it.
Michael.
Yeah, but like his character's like whole like shtick is that like he is feeling a lot of inferiority compared to like Astrid, right? Because like his
Mhm.
businesses like aren't doing really well. Like he's always having to deal with like the in-laws who like are always like making him feel like he's not particularly worthy of like being in a relationship
Mhm.
with her, right? He tries really hard, but he
Mhm.
never finds the success that like Astrid does just by nature of being herself, right? Like
Mhm.
if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I watched the movie, but if I remember correctly, like he has this whole like kind of subplot where he's like trying to like start his own business and stuff like that, and like Asher it's being really
Yeah.
supportive of him, right? But she's
Yeah.
also like at the same time just getting things easy because of her position, right? Like with when we're talking about the
Yeah.
necklace or the jewelry,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like just by her nature of being so influential already, right? Like success just comes to her, right?
Mhm.
And she doesn't really have to like deal with the fact that like the fear and the anxiety of working hard and then getting nothing for it,
Mhm.
right? And like how that
Yeah.
mentally strains their relationship. I think it's really fascinating, and I'm not sure what it says. I'm not sure what the movie's trying to say because the movie on one
Mhm.
hand is like dude with the white name, Michael, Michael. Um, on the one hand, it says like it's not going to work. Michael like ended up cheating on Ashes because he could not handle it. But on the other hand, it's also kind of like saying that like but Rachel could pull it off, right? I'm not
Mhm.
quite sure what the
Yeah.
movie thinks is like does the movie think that Rachel's going to end up like Michael, or is there something special about Rachel that is going to make her be able to overcome that? And like it feels like
Mhm.
sequel baiting. Like I imagine that it's going to be
Mhm.
something that's explored in the sequel, but
Mhm. They are making a sequel, aren't
I think
they?
there's like three
I forgot
books,
about
so
that.
like there
Yeah.
probably will be if I mean it made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Asians got on that shit. Like
That's
we made
true.
it we made it work.
That's
Um,
true. I gotta watch that. I gotta watch the. I gotta read the books. I forgot that it was based on a book. I gotta read the books.
yeah, but I'm wondering
Um.
your opinions on like how like that type of relationship dynamic works. Not even just in this hyper rich scenario, but like in actual
Yeah.
smaller scale relationships. I do imagine things like this sometimes do happen, where it's like one
Yeah. Yeah.
partner is like things are just working out so much better, right, and then the other
Mhm.
partner, right, things aren't working out, and like I imagine that has to build some sort of feelings involved.
Yeah. I think that So a lot of people say that opposites attract, and I would agree, but in specific
Hmm.
instances, right? We look at Nick and Rachel and we see two people that are just very compatible. They come from very different backgrounds. They're very different people. They grew up very differently. Their parents are very different, but like you can see it in their interactions that one, they love each other, and two, that they're compatible. They're compatible on a level that other people can understand because it's between two people who love each other and who understand each other.
Hmm.
And Rachel didn't fall in love with Nick because of his money, right? She didn't even know about it. And that was very intentional on his part,
Hmm.
right? It was very intentional on his part because he wanted to find somebody who would love him for him, and he got that. And so at the end of the day, like his money was just a jump scare for Rachel. Like her feelings, her love for him, her compassion for him and his life and him as a person and who she met and who she fell in love with are completely they are completely unrelated to the fact that he has a lot of money. Whereas we look at like Michael and Astrid's relationship and it's kind of very clear that like he's had Astrid's wealth thrown in his face
Hmm.
quite a
Yeah.
bit from her family, from people who were around him, right? I'm sure that there are plenty of his friends who made jokes about like, oh, like she wears the pants in the relationship as like dudes
Yeah.
do, you know. And like that's just something that I'm sure he found a lot of shame in when it was
Yeah.
happening. I do want to emphasize that like while it's understandable why he would be feeling upset about that, I do hope that it's a given that no matter how unhappy you are in a relationship, uh, for one, it's a very fragile man's ego that tells him that because his wife is more successful than him, that he gets the excuse to sleep around and cheat on
Hmm.
her. Second, it is also a very fragile man's ego that tells him that just because his wife is making more money than him, she's more affluent than him, more powerful than him, that he is no longer a man and he's entitled to just do douchey shit because he's not getting his way or he isn't being perceived as a man when he's with Astrid. None of that is excusable. I'm just explaining like where it comes from and like what probably happened and like as much as I can look at that and like understand and maybe empathize, I don't sympathize with that at all. And I'm hoping that most people wouldn't either. But it's I think a compatibility thing,
Hmm.
right? And when it comes down to like Nick and Rachel, their compatibility doesn't come from money, status, wealth, power. It doesn't come from something that, they're able to sort of hold in their hands. It's this very like intangible chemistry that you can just see between them and they love each other very
Hmm.
much. With Astrid and Michael, I think that it is like kind of implied that they started out that way, but even from the very first scene, you can kind of tell that there's like a very obvious strain on their relationship. Like Astrid hides away all of the things that she buys. She doesn't like to like go on shopping sprees and like show him what he she bought, which like I don't know about you, but for most of the guys that I've ever dated slash talked to, like if you go shopping, they want to see what you got.
Yes. For all the guys
Like
I
I don't
dated, yes. Yes.
I don't know if that's like I don't know if that's a common thing, but like every time I'm like told a guy that I'm going shopping, he's like, "Oh, like send me pictures later. Like we have to do like a haul later or something like that." Like I think that it just speaks volumes about the way that she like hides away her things and hides her wealth and hides the things that she's passionate about, the things that she loves, in order to make him feel more like a man. And like she says that at the very end of the
Hmm.
film, right? Like it's not my job to make you feel like a man, and that's what she's been doing. She's been putting all that responsibility on herself when it's not
It's
her
not her. It's not her
problem.
job.
Like it's literally his ego problem, right? And so like I think that that is really the fundamental difference between it, right? Is like if we're talking about just on a base level, I think the chemistry between Nick and Rachel is very different, but also the interactions that they have throughout the course of the movie and the implications like within all of those things just goes to show you that like when it comes to this sort of like gender dynamic, like Astrid and Michael were doomed kind of from the very beginning, right? Because like a man's fragile ego is going to get in the way of a lot of things. And like Rachel just doesn't have a fragile man ego because she's not a man. So like she just has I don't know. I think that like it is implied that she has more like grace and poise about the whole thing because like that's what women are required of them by society to
Hmm.
have. Like you're just supposed to have grace for stressful and frustrating ass situations and like Michael's situation wasn't even that frustrating and it wasn't even that hard, but he just couldn't hack it. And like
Yeah, I think
it's yeah.
I think like I have two things to say, but one, right, we do philosophy and stuff like that, and like in a lot
Philosophy.
of feminist studies, like we do like we talk about like gender dynamics and stuff like that, but we mostly talk about it from the way that like patriarchy affects women, right? But like with any type of like power structure system like this, I other like the people who sometimes benefit from it also get affected in a lot of ways, in which I think it's important to talk about, right?
Mhm.
How does patriarchy harm men, right? And like in some ways, it feels like a really ridiculous thing to ask, right? Because it's like
Mhm.
men benefit from it, but like also, I'm going to argue, and this might be a little controversial, that like some like men do get hurt by it too, right? And I think this is
Mhm.
how like the male like ego, this fragile male ego about wealth and success gets built, right? Because like if men are always expected by like a patriarchal system to always to define their success by wealth and power and stuff like that, men will
Mhm.
always be miserable because like
Yeah.
that is a forever moving goalpost. You will never actually
Mhm.
be able to accumulate enough wealth or power
Yep.
to actually feel
Yep.
satisfied with your life. Pursuing this line
Yep.
of thinking is fundamentally going to always make
It's
you
a
miserable,
fallacy.
right? And I think that's why
Yeah.
like a lot of men are actually really miserable. Like I don't know about in other countries, but like I do know in America, like men kill themselves a lot, right? And I think part of the problem is because like is because like we are raised to expect to define certain levels of success in these ways. Like what makes
Mhm.
like you if you like look at like men's self-help things on YouTube,
Yeah.
right? What are the things that are always telling
Mhm.
you to make more money? They're telling you to get more power. They're telling you to like work out and look better, right? What's the common theme
Mhm.
about all these three things is that they are fundamentally on never-ending goals, right? You
Yeah.
can always build more muscle. You can always have more money. You can always have more power, right? Like this
Yeah.
shit actually is not going to make you feel better. It's not going to make you feel better in your life. It's not going to make you feel like you've actually achieved anything. You are always fighting the current, right?
Mhm.
And I think you're right. Like Rachel does not have to fucking deal with that shit. Like the way she
Yeah.
was raised and socialized has its own problems, right? Like patriarchy
Yeah.
affects women way more than it affects men. I'm not saying
Yeah.
otherwise.
But that specific
Mhm.
facet of success and like wealth related power, she doesn't really have to face that every
Yeah,
day.
she
That's
doesn't.
fascinating actually. I like that. I like that aspect of it.
Um, Also, like the second thing I wanted to say, all right, I started this conversation
Yeah, 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 yeah.
trying to figure out why I think Rachel and Nick were gonna make it, and Ashard and Michael. I remembered. Uh,
Every time you say
the
Michael,
the,
I
the
make a
fucking
facial.
pause, yeah.
I
Um,
don't know. Michael.
yeah. So like I started this conversation asking like, what do I think is the answer to why one couple is gonna make it and the other couple is not? And I think through this conversation, I
Mhm.
think part of it is because like patriarchy and like Michael's like fragile male ego, right? I think
Mhm.
also part of it is that like Rachel found her own happiness and like, success without Nick. She already came into this
Yeah.
relationship as as
Yeah.
a fulfilled and satisfied economics professor. She's published and she's well
Mhm.
read. She's like big in the
Mhm.
industry. People know her. She's already found her own happiness. Her relationship is a bonus, right?
Yeah.
One of my friends told me like you shouldn't view your relationship as a goal. You should view it as like the bonus, right? And I
Mhm.
think that is so true on like so many fucking different levels, right?
Mhm.
Like you cannot depend on someone
Mhm.
else for your own happiness, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's like part of the reason why like Nick and you were kind of alluding to it how like how like Rachel finding out that Nick was wealthy was just like a jump scare, right? More than anything, right?
Yeah.
And she doesn't need it to be anything more than that because she already found her own success. She's already happy. She's already
Yeah.
fulfilled, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nick is just a bonus in her life, right? He's there to continue
Mhm.
to support her, right? But he doesn't like need she does not depend on him for like any semblance of like fulfillment in this world.
Mhm.
Michael
Mhm.
has
Yeah.
the ups. Michael, we're not quite. We don't know his backstory fully, but it seems to be quite implied that like a lot of his business ventures, a lot of the things that he is trying to build up his own success, are kind of like. if not financially funded, socially funded by Astrid being
Yeah.
present, right? Like she's the one who's
Mhm.
going to go to the openings of his business and like be there to promote, right?
Mhm.
His success will always be contingent on her presence to some degree, right? It's going
Mhm.
to be impossible to remove, right? He will
Mhm.
always, by the nature of like this relationship, always feel like he never got to build anything for himself, right? And I think that's part of the reason why he's so strained in
Yeah.
this relationship, right? Why
Yeah.
why Ash just feels the need to like hide her shopping and stuff like that, right? Is because
Mhm.
she he really needs her to not be a part of this
Mhm.
for his own like actual ability to like feel actually fulfilled because you can't be fulfilled in a relationship if you're not fulfilled by yourself, right? And
Mhm.
I genuinely think that is the problem that Michael is having here, right? Is that
Mhm.
like no
Yeah.
matter what he builds, one, it's never going to be enough because like you're never going to be able to make enough money, right? But two, it's like it's never going to be yours. It's never just going to be yours, right?
Yeah.
You're always part of you is always going to have to be like like Ashford said it right, like part of his like ego is going to have to be tied to her, and no one
Mhm.
in a relationship should be expected to hold that burden like that. Like it's not
Mhm.
healthy.
Yeah, I actually do think that like what you were talking about in terms of like success, like finding success on your own was like huge because I never like really thought about it that way. But yeah, like Rachel was established on her own before she met Nick. She didn't need his money, she didn't need his power, she didn't need his affluence, and they were in a completely different country
Mhm.
than like where his parents were, right? So like again with that compatibility, like that was a big part of it, but like absolutely what you're saying is true and probably just as big of a part of it as their compatibility is the fact that like they found each other when they were independent of all the variables that could have ruined them, you know. And that's like that's really fucking great. It'd be great if more people got into relationships that like actually served them instead of that's more social commentary, but like oh god. All right, well that's all I had to talk about, but did you want to cover anything else?
Not particularly. Like I feel
Awesome.
like
That was a good
it
convo
was a
though.
good combo. I feel like we talked about a lot
I
of pretty
haven't
interesting things.
I haven't thought about this movie in a really long time. I should probably rewatch it. This it's but like those of you who haven't seen it yet, it's a great film. Really great cast.
Like I said, you can't be
The production
Asian
value is great.
unless you watch it. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So to all you weeaboos out there, this is your in. All right. No, I genuinely enjoyed this film, and like I think there's a lot to be learned from it. And there's a lot of just good, subtle life lessons to be learned from it. And I think that like in terms of romantic relationships and romantic standards, like it's very the story itself is very stereotypical, but I think it plays a lot of things right.
Mhm.
And so yeah,
Oh,
bottom line,
also
don't
mahjong.
date anybody that isn't on your on your level. Mahjong, yes.
Mahjong.
What were you
I'm pretty
saying?
sure this movie increased mahjong sales. Like,
Oh yeah, bro, that ending scene was
there's no way a
badass.
bunch of Asian American kids didn't walk out of the film and be like, damn it, I need to learn to play mahjong.
Yeah, mom, teach me mahjong right now.
Sorry, you were saying something
No,
way more
it's
important than what I was saying.
you're totally fine. I love that though. That's how our brains work. It's that you're the unserious one, and I'm the one who's always like, socio-political commentary. Let's go that way. Um, but yeah,
We're good? This podcast was produced by Yeji.
it was created and written by both of us.
It was edited by me,
The cover art was done by my good friend Emma Nebecker.
and the background art for the videos were done by my good friend Penelope Moreno.